Yo, 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 this is Steve. This is the second episode of the Stucky podcast. And today we'll be going over my new book. If you're hearing this, this episode will be dropping on November 4th, which is also my birthday. And going over my new book, what that's about, a new giveaway, which is going on for the month of November, and, a few other things. So let's start the intro.
What's up, you mother suckers? Get jiggy with us. You know why? Because we're stuck on the island.
Okay. So we're back to it. Again, this is the Stucky podcast, episode 2. A lot has happened since I wouldn't say a lot has happened, but I've made a lot of headway. Mind you, this is literally the second podcast that I've done. And since my second podcast, I was able to get the podcast on Google Play, Stitcher, still working on TuneIn. It's on SoundCloud. So, everything from the podcast I'm trying to do is for free. And so hopefully I could get sponsors, all that stuff. But for the most part, I'm just putting stuff out there, seeing how people like it, trying to try new things and everything like that. So with that being said, today, I'm proud to announce that I am going to be releasing my 7th book, number 7. And so if you're looking at the podcast or if you're looking at the video screen, I got my 7th book in hand. It's called Risk Free. I made it over the summer as part of a art competition, not an art competition, but like a art a day exhibition. And it was, it was a really, really good experience. I'll go through all those details later, but for the most part, I'm really, really excited about it. I'll also talk about the giveaway that I'll be doing at the end. I'll actually be going over the actual book and allowing people to have a free digital copy. And, if they want to write reviews about it and stuff like that, then they could enter for a chance to win a free digital copy or a free physical copy. So it'll be signed and I'll draw a little picture in it and everything. And so without further ado, let's get after it. So Risk Free. Let me just load it up, get the page view real quick in read mode. Okay. So Risk Free, the digital edition. So Risk Free is a book that I made, and it was based off of a prompt that I wanted to do for this art a day exhibition. And the whole thing was to get a theme, and for every day in the month of June, it was either like June or July, just make a new art piece, something that resonates with you, and then put it out there. And then at the end of it, the Columbia Art Center, which I do a lot of stuff with at Hood River, they're going to exhibit it in their gallery. And so I gave myself a little bit of a particular theme. Originally, since I was studying for the MCAT, I wanted to make this project that was pretty simple, but also related to the stuff that I was working on at that moment. So since I was studying for the MCAT, I had the idea of making a visual like MCAT book. But then I slowly felt that, just doing that whole project while I'm studying and still trying to master the material would have, it would have been difficult. And so from there, I decided to, with everything that's been going on with, like the barbecue Becky and parking or permit Patty, all those different things. I just started thinking about a whole lot of different ways to tell a meaningful story. And as usual, I'll always try to like tell meaningful stories within my work. And this was something that kind of just resonated with me. One from a personal level of, dealing with injustices and all those different things. But also, I felt like it lended itself for a opportunity to teach and, connect people in a way that wouldn't necessarily be met. And especially for this art exhibition, it was something that I wanted to make a statement about and stuff like that. And so what I did is I ended up getting, some markers, because I mostly work in ink. So I ended up getting some markers. I ended up getting a 30-page sketchbook, and I literally just like every single day I would, sketch out a page, and then I would just like ink it and do a whole bunch of different things with it. And so it was definitely one of those experiences where I put a lot into it, but I limited myself to just about like an hour, no more than an hour or two per image, just because I was doing a whole lot of other things with it. But as we go through the book, I'll discuss a whole lot of, the details that went behind my approach. So with that being said, here we go. So Risk Free, digital edition, by Stephen Christian. So we have the cover. With that, since I'm giving away a digital, pretty much anybody could have a digital copy, especially for the month of November, I wanted to push, the opportunity of getting more and more book reviews. And so right now the book is on Goodreads, it's on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Nobles. And so if you could give me a good review for Amazon, a book review for Goodreads, I would greatly appreciate it. And again, you get a free digital copy, so definitely check that out. And I'll put all the links in the description of the podcast and everything too. Or if you're seeing this on YouTube, I'll put that in the description as well. Okay, so first starts off with the comic, and we'll go after it. So, and that is why the most threatened population in the society that the media continues to ignore is the silent, God-fearing majority. Thank you, Petrie, for that valuable insight on the assault on Christmas. Thomas Jenkins, your presentation on the risk of existing in a free world is next. Hey, class. James Baldwin so eloquently wrote, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in rage almost all the time. So that the first problem is how to control that rage so that it won't destroy you. But what does that actually mean to be relatively conscious? And when you gain that consciousness, how does that affect your view of the world? The big question is, how does consciousness affect the way you exist in a world full of risks and rewards? Is the risk worth the reward?" To stroll down the street without saying a peep, with those J's on your feet, is it worth it? To whistle to a beat is no large feat. If you reduce left feet, is it worth it? To shoot up a prayer and throw your faith in the air, you're just looking for peace. Is it worth it? To put up a fight and stand with all might, it's our constitutional right. Is it worth it? To fall into Zen, deep breaths up to 10, you're just searching for balance. Is it worth it? To ball on the bricks or win on the sticks? If you break their ankles, is it worth it? To flex on a sucker is disrespect to a busted. Gold chain, gold wrist, gold neck, is it worth it? To need for speed or obey the signs you read, to all the dangers you heed, is it worth it? To complete a task, determination will ask, if there are cracks on the path, is it worth it? To stack up cheese or find a niche with ease, if you break that glass ceiling, is it worth it? To lend a hand or donate what you can, to be a gentleman, is it worth it? To put in work, whether long or short, sweat equity, is it worth it? To kick back, relax, and enjoy the wranglers they may deploy. Your phone is no more a toy. Is it worth it? To energize your life and start the day off right, honing it may cause you strife. Is it worth it? To let it sprinkle may provoke some people. If you dodge soil from tinkle, is it worth it? To chill at the crib before the couch you call dibs, in the domain that you live, is it worth it? To save a friend is a splendid trend, but giving a soul a mend, is it worth it? To take the train is an utter pain. If you expand your range, is it worth it? To study for weeks, teen spirit the room weeks. If you sleep around geeks, is it worth it? To tame the beast is noble when beat, but to risk defeat, is it worth it? To boys and their toys, imagination enjoys. If creativity employs, is it worth it? To stuff your face, whether picnic or base, it leads to disgrace. Is it worth it? To charcoal meat, you may trigger elite. For seasoned, simple fare, is it worth it? To stand your ground keeps you safe and sound, but bearing arms, is it worth it? To sell charms may spark alarms. If enterprise is free, is it worth it? To pull loose weeds or take care of needs, if you do no harm, is it worth it? To eat hot cakes with syrup and shakes, if you love whatever you bake, is it worth it? To kneel high stakes, you jeopardize and advocate. If time awaits the greats, is it worth it? To take long breaks from the pains and the aches, if you rest too late, is it worth it? To express with pen and give voice to the men, regardless if you win, is it worth it? To swim with a friend until summer's end, if you seek a grin, is it worth it? To quench your wind or generate to spin, if barren maws offend, is it worth it? Through freedom of expression with creativity and aggression, may fear and awaken a middle class Amer sapien. Even mere existing, you may end up missing. Remember your meaning and keep your sparkle gleaming. Yes, life is hard, full of battle scars. As you ponder afar, ask yourself if it is worth it. What the flip? I thought you said those pictures was going to get my modeling career popping. Oh my God. If I see you in the street, you gonna catch this fade. Thank you, Thomas, for that valuable insight on the risk of existing in a free world. Roscoe Thomason, your presentation on why the Player Haters Ball is the most underappreciated event of modern society is up next. The end. So I tried to throw a little comedy in there at the end, about having Roscoe is essentially realize that if you're actually looking at the book, it's essentially TJ, one of my characters. He was telling the whole story, and then and throughout the story, you see different pictures of Roscoe in these different situations. And at the end of the project, we all realized that Roscoe was actually a model in all the pictures, and TJ was the photographer. And apparently, TJ convinced Roscoe to take all the pictures in order to get his modeling career popping, because Roscoe be like clout chasing a little bit, and so instead of realizing his modeling career was going to get popping, he realized that he was just a guinea pig, or he was just a prop in TJ's project. And so he gets upset because he feels like he's been exploited and he's not getting any money for it. And so I just wanted to throw that in there just so it fits within the scheme of the whole world of Utopia that I built. But aside from the point, then at the end, there's like sketchbook. I also have my original poem that I started off with. Afterwards, I ended up expanding the whole thing from like 15 or 16 pieces to 32. And so each one of these represents a very specific piece. And so it gives you a little bit of like processes, progress shots and stuff like that at the end, how I made it. And kind of like a statement of what this meant to me. And so I'll actually read it because it meant a lot to me in terms of why I wanted to create this project and just everything that was going on. So like I said earlier, I got the idea or shifted the idea from like trying to do like an MCAT inspired thing to an actual social commentary, because during this time, this was the time where, more and more stories were coming out of people getting, black people, specifically black kids, black people were getting the cops calling them for like the most mundane of things. And you're just like, dang, like people barbecuing, people selling, stuff on the street, people just going to the pool, people using water fountains, all these different things. And, I just started to see a trend after a while. And so, with social media, everything is coming to the forefront. I just felt like it was one of those things that were, we have to discuss as a society, and, as I looked at it, on the surface, it was one of those things where you're looking at, okay, it's always, excuse me. It's always one of those things where, older, like white women and stuff like that, they're going around and they're just calling the cops on people just because they feel threatened or whatever they feel entitled to. But on a deeper level, it's more of a a conversation on, the consequences of actions and how actions, dictate how people see you and how those actions impact your life. And so, we live in a free society, and at the forefront of being in a free society, we have the liberty and the opportunity to create things. We have the liberty and the opportunity to connect with people. We can express ourselves the way we want. and we shouldn't be defined by all that stuff. But then you have you have all these things that are literally getting in the way of your liberty, you know? And if we live in America, it's, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you're infringing on one of those, then I feel like that is the antithesis of us as, you know, Americans. You know, we all pay taxes. We all do those things that I feel are, you know, human rights for us to live and exist. And for somebody to try to take that away from us just because they feel uncomfortable or just because they feel like it's their civic duty to police others when they don't have any jurisdiction for it is, you know, it's, to me, it's un-American. And I mean, it's rude. It's being a prick. And so from this, I tried to create it as a book that transcends race, transcends all these different things. And I tried to use it as more of like my approach is more of like the Dr. Seuss sort of feel, where you have a picture, you have different elements, and all these elements were essentially, all these images were essentially different pictures that historically, you know, has specific cases around them, you know, sitting on a stoop, praying, all these things, you know, the black people that are depicted in here, the things that Roscoe are depicting, these have all led to, you know, black people either getting thrown in jail, you know, being arrested, being publicly humiliated, or killed, you know, from like, you know, shootings in churches, to the Black Panthers, to just doing yoga, playing basketball, just being pulled over because you're riding in a nice car, you know, riding your bike, being a paper boy, just trying to get money, you know, like trying to earn a living, trying to help the homeless, mowing the lawn, literally, you know, literally sleeping on a tractor in a parking lot. Obviously Starbucks. And then I also wanted to take it back a little bit and show that, you know, things like this have always been happening, you know, because I feel like people forget that segregation, like people were living through segregation. People that are alive today grew up in segregation. You know, I think my girlfriend's dad, you know, grew up in segregation, you know, where there was white and, you know, colored water fountains and drinking fountains and, you know, bathrooms. You know, like people were going to jail. People were getting killed. People were offended for black people using the same bathroom as them and drinking the same water as them. You know, I think I saw a meme where somebody posted that, you know, they talk about how millennials are, you know, snowflakes, but nobody ever mentions that back in the old days when America, quote unquote, was great, that people were outraged when black people used their water fountains and bathrooms, you know? And so talking about how like people have, you know, are looking for a reason to be triggered and how they can't take any sort of criticism, but you guys can't deal with, you know, somebody using the same water fountain or bathroom. Like it's, you know, feel like people tend to forget that stuff. And so I wanted to approach these images that are like nice, fun, and playful, but also have a lot of have a deeper meaning to them. And you know, it was definitely a very good experience to work on this, just because it allowed me to, you know, tell that story and have these different things to where, you know, you could see the individual art pieces and they look very fun and like colorful and stuff like that. But then when you really dig deeper into it, you're like, oh, wow, that is a scene that, you know, lends to, you know, a bad ending that you wouldn't expect. And you see those throughout the book, and you wouldn't get that just on the surface of it. You're just looking at all these different things. And so with the overall message wasn't to, you know, talk about how, you know, black people were with that, you're not talking about how black people, I'm not talking about how black people are, like it's horrible for black people or anything like that. Really, the deeper message is that, in the context of all the things that we see, like, I wanted to show that, you have to be conscious of everything that you do. Growing up black, everybody that I know, like even my father, I grew up, he was, in law enforcement. A lot of like the significant male figures in my life, they all were in law enforcement. They played football, they did all those things. So I like come from a different perspective of like, my dad was a cop. My dad worked in law enforcement, and I still had to, he still gave me that talk of, why I shouldn't walk around or have a paintball gun in my car or an airsoft gun, or, why I shouldn't do certain things, or what I need to be aware of, why I need to make sure that like my tags and like my headlights and my rear view mirrors and everything are, all good. I need to make sure that like I need to keep my hair cut. I need to make sure that like I come across as somebody that has an education, because he's experienced those things. My mom has experienced those things, and it's just a way of life, And so when I got to college, not really in college, like growing up in middle school and everything like that, you realize that certain people just don't get those talks, aren't exposed to those different things. And so as they grow up, their worldview is warped in a way. And it was just always really interesting. And I would say like, it wasn't until I moved to Portland where, people were like kind of fake woke. I always look at them as, I always consider like Portlanders as, the people in Berkeley that like aren't really about living in trees. Like they say that, they're about that life, but they're really not about that life. Like they're not gonna, abandon their fireplace for a treehouse, And so, I always get a kick out of it because, there's people that, are quote unquote allies, but some concepts just go over their head. And mind you, like most of the popular things that have been happening over the past year in terms of like, black people getting the cops called on them for just living while black, essentially, were happening in the Bay Area, Lake Merritt, San Francisco, those places that are like quote unquote liberal. You still see, that underlying racism. Where people feel comfortable and feel entitled to, control other people just because they feel entitled to, it's just one of those things. And so, to be a little more meta, I would say, or to, talk about more deeper issues, really the issue that I wanted to talk about is just accountability, understanding that, and using the black experience as an example, just wanted to talk about how, you can only control your actions, and your actions can only get you so far. You have to be aware of how you look. You have to be aware of how you're approaching people, how you talk, all those different things that that black people just in general on average have to think about as they traverse the world. Do I in my body do I come across as too aggressive? Do I come across as all these things? How do people see me regardless of how I see myself? Me personally, I went through this phase where I used to have longer hair. I was a football player. It's like, over 6 feet, I was big, I had muscles, all that stuff. And then I got to the point where it's like, like I need to, if I don't want to get unwanted attention towards myself, I need to proactively present myself a certain way. I cut my hair. I started wearing glasses. When I finished playing football, I lost all that weight. I finished up playing. When I finished up playing, I was like 215. I was like a good 215. Like I was like 6 6'1.5", 215, like, less than 6-7% body fat. And I instantly dropped to like 180, like obviously my body fat percentage went up, cut my hair, wore glasses, all those different things. So I look less aggressive. I look less intense to people when I approach people. I work as a, I do contract work. I make books. I do conventions and stuff, but I also work as a personal trainer. And, there's always times, especially when I started working there, that, there are always times where people would, say like, oh yeah, like he's a really nice guy and stuff like that. Like he's not rude or anything, but he comes across as like a little aggressive, or like he neglects our complaints and stuff like that. And that stuff is just really, really frustrating at some point, because you're like, okay, in terms of customer service, what can I do to, make people feel comfortable, play certain music, all those different things. And then at the end of the day, like, people still have this preconceived notion of you. And it's always, people won't say like, oh yeah, he's just, he's like, me, I'm not even dark. Like, he just comes across as aggressive, or he comes across as very cold and off-putting, and kind of has like a chip on his shoulder and stuff. And, those are like subtle keywords that you pick up on just over the course of going through like higher education and stuff like that. There's certain keywords that you pick up on that like mean different things, and I'm not really going to go into it like that, but it's a lived experience that, a particular group of people experience on a regular basis and understand without having to actually be, fleshed out. And so, with that, I'll just read the last part, of the book, is that like, although many of the specifics, pertaining to the Black community, the overarching message is that we live in a land of opportunities. With that freedom, we should know everything we do does not happen in a vacuum. And it doesn't. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything is connected to something. We may not go about our days committing crimes, but our actions have consequences that we have no control over. Those consequences impact how we interact with others and how the world sees us. No, being a prick and spewing hate is not a crime. We have our First Amendment right and all that stuff. But just because you aren't committing a crime doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. People talk about building a wall and like all these things. It's like, yeah, there's politics involved and stuff like that. I understand that. But at some point, you have to stop being a prick. Like a perfect example is the Megyn Kelly situation, where, she's had a history of, talking to literally like shutting people down and taking her opinions and trying to make them facts for other people. And so, talking about how like, Santa Claus and Jesus are white people, and that like anybody else that thinks otherwise is stupid. And, she didn't say that exactly, but she said that like on her show, like, stop acting like Jesus and Santa Claus aren't white, because they are, and stuff like that. And then talking about the blackface thing, and, these are actions, and these actions, no, they weren't illegal. She has her freedom of speech, but those actions have consequences, especially in the workplace, and especially with those public platforms, and I feel like people will try to get their own personal views involved and try to claim them as facts. And then, then that's where the problems arise, and people will treat them accordingly. Like if you say some, racist stuff, doesn't matter how you feel inside. Those racist things mean that you're a racist, regardless of how you feel, just like with anything else. If you say some prick stuff, people will say that you're a prick because you're a prick. If you commit a crime, those crimes define you, like, and no, you can't go into somebody's mind, but that's how it is. And so, for me, it's always a conversation, because I deal with a lot of teachers at work, and the biggest thing is consequences. Like people, the big thing for them is they try to teach kids that, like if you do your work, you get rewarded. If you don't do your work, you get punished. Each action has a consequence, regardless of what it is. And you have to be aware that all those consequences are very real things. And so where was I? Aren't committed crimes doesn't mean that you should do it. On the flip side, being a good person isn't always good enough when the world sees you as something else. For some, that is the hardest pill to swallow. No matter what we do, personally, we cannot control others. That is the price of freedom. As cryptic as it sounds, the sooner you accept that notion as fact, the sooner you can focus on the literal, what really matters, which is living your best life. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's like we have all these risks, we have all these things. And, even though it seems like you're walking on eggshells sometimes, I mean, for me, I've always felt like I've been walking on eggshells for a while. Just making sure as I'm trying to get into medical school, making sure that I'm, dotting my I's, crossing my T's, all those different things. But at the end of the day, like if it becomes debilitating for you, it becomes one of those things that you can't control. You can't control every little thing. You can't control if your car breaks down. You can't control if, there's an accident on the road. You can't control if, you're trying to get sleep and then somebody is, like being noisy outside, or if you live across the street from a school like I do, you can't control if they have a football game that goes late. You can't control those things, but you can control your actions and how you respond to them. And so, the world isn't perfect and everything isn't always predictable. You can map out your life as much as you can, but, life happens. And that's a very real thing. And so it's just a matter of, how you navigate that world and how you need to just be, consistent with it. And if you do, the sooner you do that, the sooner you accept it, the better off you'll be in the long run. And that's the big thing from this is that you want to have the opportunity to pursue everything that you want, but you don't want to hinder other people and you don't want other people to hinder you. And so if the more you kind of control what you can do and just accept that some things just happen, the better off you're going to be, the easier it is to focus on other things. Like I've had hip surgeries, over the course of my football journey. And yeah, that freaking sucked. I literally still deal with all those problems now. Like my hips lock up, all those different things. But at the end of the day, you have to realize that those are just the cards that you were dealt with, and regardless of how bad it is, cancer, all those different things, you still have life to live. And, you could easily, have your life cut short just going to work, or just walking your kid to school or just being in school. Or you could have your, you can't control those things. I always, whenever I get into this moment where I'm like always worried about what to do next, and lose track of, literally just living life, in the moment, I always think about, how easy it is to just, die from a toaster explosion or die from, different things like that. Like it's like those are very real things. Just the probability of just getting in a car crash and getting in a car accident and having your life change from that. Those things are really high, but we don't really have those at the forefront of our minds. We're always worried about, immigrants coming and killing us, or, getting in, plane accidents, or, like somebody robbing you, stuff like that. All these crazy out of the box things that do happen, but don't happen very often. We never realize that our phones could blow up in our pockets and all that stuff, which also happens to us as well. And so, it's like this project for me, I would say, obviously it's my 7th book, it's a book that I worked on and stuff like that. But, it's one of those things that I've always appreciated. and it's one of those things that like I think can start a conversation, you know. So if anybody is interested, you guys can go to gumroad.com. Let me see if I can find it. Gumroad.com/Iltopia. GUMROAD.com/ILTOPIA. You could go down to risk free. It's risk free digital giveaway. You click it and you could donate what you want. So it says 0+ right there. So if you want to donate to it, feel free to. Otherwise, it's free. You just go down and you click download or I want this. The book is 44 pages. It's a PDF, so you can, it shouldn't take up too much room on your thing. You just click it. I think type in your email address and it'll send you an email address, or it'll send you an email link for it. Or you could pre-order it. By the time you see this, it will be November 4th, which is also my birthday. And so, you could shoot me a happy birthday if you like. If you don't care, so be it. I'm not going to hold people hold it against them for that. But you could go to Amazon. You could type in risk free. It's in paperback. You could pre-order a copy. Or if you want to write a customer review, just write a review. Give me 1 to 5 stars. Hopefully you give me 5 stars, but I'm not gonna hold it against people. But if you do that, you can go to Barnes and Nobles, do the same thing. Or if you're like a member of Goodreads, you could do that as well. Again, Risk Free by Stephen Christian. And then from there, at the end of November, I will put all the review names in a raffle, and I will give 10 lucky winners a signed copy of the book. I'll throw in some stickers. I'll do a whole bunch of different things just to show my appreciation. If not, feel free not to. Just check out the book. I would greatly appreciate a review. I'm in this phase of my creative endeavors. I feel like I'm at the point now where, I have a job, I'm not freelancing. I'm not doing anything else but studying, working, and creating. And I'm at the point where I could afford to just create without having to worry about, the financial burden of all those things. It was really liberating to order 50 copies of my new book and not have to stress about how I'm going to pay for it. I would like to make money off of it, but I'm not creating this stuff to make money off of it. I would like to get it to a point with my podcast and all that stuff to, so that, it's self-sustaining, but at the point I'm supplementing, doing other stuff for other people in order to do the stuff that I like for people. And so with that, definitely check out the stuff. Let me know, since my podcast is on Google Play and Stitcher and all those things. I'm trying to get it on iTunes right now, but people that know me, they know how I feel about Apple products and iTunes and stuff like that. It's definitely given me a lot more hassles. And so hopefully that works. But give me a good review. Shoot me a message on Twitter. Let me know how you feel about the podcast. If there's any things that you want me to talk about, let me know about that stuff. And yeah. Without any further ado, I think this will end the podcast. Dang, 45 minutes. Yeah, 45 minutes. So, I tried to do a 15-minute podcast. It ended up being 45 minutes. That's what happens. So I will catch you guys on the flip side. Adios.